Yo, what's good, E7 fam? Pat here, back with another how to play video, and in this one we're going to be talking about the angriest waifu in the game, Senya. As with all of my how to play videos, I'm going to go super in depth and cover the character stats, the skills, some possible endgame equipment builds for you to try out and experiment with, as well as specifically for Senya, a ton of matchup knowledge for World Arena if you're trying to use her there. So, with the intro out of the way, let's jump right into Senya's stats. Senya is an Earth Knight of the Taurus zodiac symbol. She's the only one that has this actual stat line. Taking a closer look at her stats, do not be fooled by the 1,445 attack that it says she has in her profile. It is actually 1,112. The disparity between the actual attack and what is listed is due to her S2 passive, Indomitable Spirit, and we'll talk more about that in the next section. She has 6,321 health, 100 speed, 645 defense, 15% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, 5% dual attack chance, and no effectiveness or effect resistance. Overall, Senya has really good stats for a knight. She has the highest attack, I believe, even with the reduced attack amongst all knights in the game. She has very good HP, very good defense. Honestly, the only stat that you can really fault this character on is having low speed. 100 is pretty bad at this point in the game's life. You really want like 108, 109 or better if you can get it. But overall, I still think that Senya's stats are quite good. As a bit of trivia before moving on to the skills section, in the English dub of Epic 7, Senya is voiced by Reba Burr, who you may remember that we talked about from How to Play Politis. She shares the same voice actress. In the Japanese dub of Epic 7, however, Senya is voiced by Yumi Hara, who you can hear as characters such as Yumi in the Senran Kagura as well as BlazBlue video games, Albedo from the anime Overlord, and Anastasia from the Fate franchise. Senya's S1 is Spear of Vengeance. It has a 0.95x multiplier. It has a 65 to 75% chance to provoke the target for one turn, depending on Molagora. And when it's not Senya's turn, this effect chance is increased by 25%, which makes it excellent for obviously dual attacking and counter attacking. Senya's S2 passive is her signature skill, Indomitable Spirit. She cannot land any critical hits whatsoever due to this passive. So building critical hit chance and crit damage on this character is basically useless. To make up for that, she gets a 30% attack increase as well as critical hit resistance. The attack increase is 30% of her total attack at the end of everything. So we use the base of 1,112 and then add all of her gear and artifacts on top of that, take that total number, and then get an extra 30% on top of that. That is how the passive works. When you see it in the journal, it is the 1,112 with no gear, no artifacts whatsoever, so you only get a 30% increase from that number. But as you put more and more attack on this character, this passive will obviously scale up. And that critical hit resistance that she receives, she gets 35 to 50% of it depending on Molagora, and it attributes greatly to her survivability. So you can focus on getting a ton of attack on this character and not have to worry about making her super tanky and bulky like you do for most knights, because even built as a bruiser or somebody with not too much defense whatsoever, she will still have quite a bit of survivability. Whenever she is attacked, if the target deals a non-critical hit on her, which they probably will due to the critical hit resistance nature of this passive, she will return some of the damage back to the attacker, and on top of that, she will activate the skill Grace of the Battlefield. Let's talk about the damage that she returns to the attacker now, as well as the skill Grace of the Battlefield. So, for the return damage, I cannot find specific damage multipliers on that, but it appears to be roughly half of the damage that the S3 does to a single target, meaning that we can ballpark the return damage that Senya deals to her attacker as roughly somewhere between 0.75x and 0.8x of her attack score. so keep that in mind. Additionally, Grace of the Battlefield is a non-attack skill that will give the entire party a random buff for 1 turn and can only be activated once every 2 turns. The random buffs that you can receive include an attack buff, an effectiveness buff, a defense buff, a continuous healing buff, and an immunity buff. Think of this skill honestly as a bonus because you can't really guarantee what buffs each of the characters on your team gets. You will usually end up with something like Senya getting, say, like an effectiveness buff, and then you might get like a defense buff on a character that's a glass cannon and doesn't really need it. Just again, think of it more as a bonus, a nice to have ability rather than something you should depend on, because again, you can't control the RNG of the move, and the duration honestly is pretty short. Honestly, I kind of hate this portion of the actual skill. Grace of the Battlefield, in my experience, usually does more harm than good because, again, it is a non-attack skill, which means that it can trigger skills from characters like Politis and Celine, and that can end up getting you punished and get certain characters on your team killed. So I really don't like this portion of the passive, but everything else is pretty gravy. Critical hit resistance means that Senya is going to be an incredibly tanky bruiser pretty much no matter how you build her. You can go straight offense, and this skill will basically make her very difficult to kill if RNG is on your side. Senya's S3 is Dragon Slayer Strike. You acquire 3 souls upon usage, and it has a 4 to 5 turn cooldown depending on Molagora. It is an AoE attack with a 1.5x attack multiplier. She has a 75 to 100% chance to blind all enemies when using the skill for 2 turns. Additionally, she will adopt a counter-attacking stance for 2 turns. While in counter-attack stance, it guarantees that Senya will counter every time she's attacked as long as she still has this buff. Obviously, this provides excellent synergy with her S1 as you will get that increased provoke chance. It's also really amazing because of some of the additional effects that you can give Senya's S1, and we'll talk more about those in the next section with the exclusive equipment, as well as in the character builds when it comes to artifact choices. Senya's Soul Burn costs 10 souls and reduces the skill cooldown of Dragon Slayer's Strike by 2 turns, essentially meaning that you can kind of have the counter attack stance up almost the entire fight as long as you're willing to spend souls on it. Honestly, this is nice, but not really amazing. In my experience playing Senya for the last like 6 to 9 months or however long she's been out, it simply just isn't worth using the soul burn on the character unless she's pretty much the last person standing and you have nothing else to use your souls on. When it comes to Molagora priorities, I personally would max Indomitable Spirit S2 first, as it gives you the most amount of survivability, and that's what I look for characters first. I want to make sure that my characters stick around a long time so they can do their job. It might be different for you. After that, I would either prioritize S3 for the -1 turn cooldown and the effect chance, or the S1 for its raw damage and the fact that it is the move that you will most likely be using throughout a fight on Senya. Overall, Senya is a bruiser and a damage dealer first and foremost, so I really think that you want this character at plus 15. You want her to stick around, you want her to do as much damage as possible. Before moving on to the character builds, we first have to talk about Senya's exclusive equipment, which is Grace of Lightning. As always, I'm assuming you have a 14% health Grace of Lightning when I do all my calculations for this video. The exclusive equipment, as always, has 3 different options for you. The first one makes it so that her S1, Spear of Vengeance, has lifesteal built into it, and the amount that you recover increases proportional to Senya's attack. In my experience, this is fantastic, and it's the one that I personally use, as the amount of lifesteal is pretty substantial. It's roughly around, I'd say, 2,000 to 2,500 HP back, at least with my level of attack on my Senya. So your mileage may vary, but for me, that is quite a lot, and it allows her to stick on the board quite a bit longer. And as we talked about in the previous section, I prioritize my characters living longer so that they can do their job and continue to stay in the fight. The second one makes it so that Grace of the Battlefield's random buff duration is increased by 1 turn. I already don't like Grace of the Battlefield, and this doesn't fix any of the problems I feel that it has, because you're still just getting a random buff, and it could be a buff that doesn't benefit the character that receives it. And again, when you proc Grace of the Battlefield, you can potentially get punished for it, so it doesn't really help you in that aspect either. The third exclusive equipment makes it so that when you use the S3 Dragon Slayer Strike, you get a greater attack buff for 2 turns in addition to adopting the counter-attacking stance. This makes her counters absolutely hurt, and her S1s do an absolute ton of damage. I think for most players, you're going to want to be on either the S1 EE or the S3 EE, and which one you choose depends entirely on your play style. If you are more of a defensive oriented player, I think that the S1 is great, and if you're more aggressive, I think you want to be playing the third one. I have seen both of these EEs work at the highest level of play in the Emperor and Legend ratings, so again, you can't really go wrong with either of them. Overall, Senya's exclusive equipment is very good. Even with her inability to land critical strikes, Senya is still a hard-hitting, damage-dealing bruiser at the end of the day, and one that's pretty well built, especially for a damage dealer. Thanks to her critical hit resistance and solid base parameters, Senya really specializes at hunkering down and taking a bunch of punishment. Her playstyle is essentially weathering the storm of her opponent's blows until she can finally rip and tear through them until it's done. This makes her incredibly well suited at fighting slow, counter-oriented fighters such as Rem and Violet, and it also makes her really good against squishy damage-dealing teams, usually those ones found in cleave compositions. By the way, nothing is funnier in Epic 7 than watching enemies break their weapons against Senya's armor. The first time you watch an enemy literally turn to dust from the damage returned by Indomitable Spirit is a truly special feeling, and it's something I hope that you all get to experience at least once. On the topic of gearing Senya, her build path is pretty on theme for her character from the story. It's honestly kind of a flavor win. To quote the brother of a foolish devil hunter, I need more power. Due to her passive abilities, Senya has an incredibly small amount of stats that she can actually utilize, so it feels like the devs have balanced her in a way that they assume that you're just building those stats sky high. Just like the stone she wields, she's incredibly hungry. Stat hungry, that is. I'm going to show you 2 variations of gear here for Senya in a second, and both of these variations are, for the most part, the exact same build. This character really only cares about one thing, and that is huge stats. As long as your stats are really good, at the end of the day, the sets don't really matter. She cares about stats first and foremost. For the first variation, I'm going with what I think is the optimal setup, which is attack immunity. But as you can tell, I play revenge hit because that's what makes the math work for me. It's going to be different depending on your box. I think attack is the best, but you can also play speed or revenge set. I have seen counter Senyas, and I have also seen lifesteal Senyas in the past. If those work for you, that's fine. I think counter and lifesteal are worse than speed, revenge, or attack in terms of efficiency, because those stats actually give, or I should say those sets, pardon me, actually give stats, which makes it easier to get higher numbers. So I feel like you could have more effectiveness on those sets. So yeah, whatever works for you, that's fine. When we take a look at the desired stats, we want 4,615 attack. This is so if you clear this number, the 30% extra attack that you will receive from the S2 passive will put you over 6,000 attack. I find that Senyas that don't clear at least 6,000 attack really struggle to actually, have an impact in games. So I think it is really, really important, more than any other stat on this character, that you have her attack after her passive is applied over 6,000. I play 6,100 at the moment, but I, again, really, really want to caution you and warn you, you need, I think, over 6,000 attack. I just feel like the character falls flat when they're at like 5,500, 5,700. It just doesn't feel as impactful as clearing that 6,000 hurdle, which is, again, why I think attack is the best set overall for her, because it makes things easiest for you when you are trying to build this character. For the defense, I have 1,500 defense. Although in the second variation, you will see that I have a build with a significantly lower amount of defense, and it's the same amount of defense that you may have noted for my revenge build on your screen. I have 17k HP, 185 speed, obviously no crit hit chance or damage because the character literally cannot land critical strikes, and no effectiveness or effect resistance. Taking a look at the right side, I am on an HP percentage necklace, but You have to choose the necklace based on what you need from your gear. If you don't have a lot of defense percentage, choose a defense percentage neck. If you are struggling to make that attack percentage work, but you have a bunch of pieces that just give a ton of bulk, then by all means take the attack percentage necklace. The ring, I feel like it is best to just choose attack percentage ring because this is what I feel most people have. You could apply the same logic as a necklace. You could use an attack percentage necklace, a defense percentage ring, or an HP percentage ring. I leave it up to you. I didn't put it here on the screen. It's simply just because I thought that for the most part, everybody would have attack percentage rings because that's usually what people hold on to. Boots is speed so that she can actually have some kind of game impact. I really think you do want her around 185 speed. That's where I've had the most amount of success with her. However, I have seen Senyas in the 170 range that are just fine. I've seen 170, 175 Senyas on attack set, and that's A-okay. I'm again just using 185 for my calculations. I've seen even faster than that. I would say for most of you watching this video, as long as your Senya falls between 170 and 200 speed and does not compromise on any of these stats, it's fine. When we take a look at the artifact, I'm on Spear of a New Dawn. I know it's a 5-star artifact, but I've found that it is the best one for the character in all of my testing with her. And the other ones that I think are really good are the ones that are also listed here. But Spear of a New Dawn gives me more damage, makes my matchups better against characters like Violet and things like that. So I really, really like Spear of a New Dawn the best. But what you like depends entirely on you. I have guildmates that really, really swear by Holy Sacrifice. Holy Sacrifice gives you an amazing matchup against Cleave for the most part. It really, really makes it hard to lose unless they're like an insanely good cleaver. They just simply don't expect it. It gives your Senya extra lives. So I do like that option. I have run that in the past. Warhorn is another great option because it allows Senya to take more turns, especially against faster teams like Cleave. She can basically wipe out an entire Cleave team with just her S3. And whatever, lives is just going to die due to the counter-attacking stance. So having Warhorn gives you not only extra attack, but it will allow Senya to be quicker off the line and get her S3 counter-attacking stance up, and that's really, really useful. So I think these three are the best ones. I think for most players, Spear of a New Dawn is the best option. But if you don't have it, obviously Warhorn is the free-to-play option, and you can consider trying Holy Sacrifice. Looking at the per-piece average, you can see that it is 33% attack. Remember, I told you, this character wants to be sky high in terms of attack. 33% average attack per piece. That is a lot, guys. So the way that I have approached it with the per piece average is actually only listing 23% attack and listing 100 flat attack on the average piece. It is really important on every single attack percentage ring or necklace that you choose to play on this character that you have flat attack as well. The only way you're going to ever realistically hit the goal for this character is to have attack percentage and flat attack on all of your pieces. And I don't think that's too much of a sacrifice, as this character literally can only make use of flat attack, basically attack percentage, HP percentage, flat HP, defense percentage, flat defense, and effectiveness. She only really can use 7 stat parameters, and 6 of them are essentially the same ones twice. So you should have no issues dumping a bunch of flat attack onto this character to make her succeed. The second build to talk about isn't really even that different of a build from the first one, and that's why I've listed it as variation number 2, because it's essentially the same thing. Again, Senya really only cares about stats. The sets do matter, but those are secondary to the stats. So attack, I think, again, is ideal, but you can play speed or revenge. For this one, I'm just using speed as the base for the calculations because it's very common, and you'll see looking at the desired stats, basically nothing has really changed here. You're still trying to get that adjusted 6,000 attack. The only major changes here are 1,200 defense and 20k HP as opposed to 1,500 defense and 17k HP. They both have roughly the same amount of effective HP. It is easier, depending on what gear you have in your box, to hit one of these two numbers. So you can either be on 1,200 defense, 20k HP, or 1,500 defense, 17k HP. I leave it to you based on the gear you have. Shoot for one of those thresholds on one of the sets. Again, not really too much has changed here at all. Looking at the right side, it is almost exactly the same. You have freedom to choose whatever you want for the necklace and the ring. Boots are still speed so that we can make some kind of impact in a game. artifacts, again, haven't really changed because the character is fundamentally on the same build, just with a slight variation in terms of the desired stats. Looking at the per piece average, you can see we need even more attack on this build because we're not on an attack set, which is why I said I thought attack was optimal, because I feel like most players won't struggle as much. A lot of the pieces that I play personally on my Senya are over 40% attack to make up for certain things. So yeah, I'm just letting you know, again, this character very stat hungry for attack. So you really need to min max and get as much flat attack as you can wherever you can. So if you're playing an attack percentage main stat accessory, it must have flat attack on this character, or I just don't think that you will have a Senya that has a big game impact. And you really want every character that you have to have big impact whenever possible. Senya actually has a fair number of interesting choices when it comes to teammates. Obviously, you have standard fare when playing against Cleave characters. Obviously, Fallen Cecilia is a great character versus Cleave, and just in general, a character like Mercedes with her Magic for Friends is obviously another character that's super good against Cleave, and that's usually where Senya really shines, is against those squishy Cleave teams. But there are a few others that I really want to highlight. The first one is Rimuru, and that is because he is a character that really thrives on having a lot of buffs. And usually there will be an enemy that's faster than him on the enemy team, which means that he will proc, analyze, and assess right away, and he will get a bunch of buffs. And if they started with an AoE attack, there's a good chance it'll proc Grace to the battlefield as well, which means Rimuru is going to start with 8 buffs, and he's going to be able to get that max damage S3 right away. Diane is another really interesting teammate choice because she gives you 50% critical hit resistance, which when combined with Indomitable Spirit on Senya means that no one can land any critical hits on her, so she will always return damage to the opponent. That's really good and really strengthens her survivability. It's actually a pretty fun Guild War composition to try out. Go Diane, Senya, and somebody else, and it can obviously work at lower to mid ranks as well in World Arena. Other characters to consider are characters like Fairy Tale Tenebria, because her S3 will give the reverse provoke, and it will pull the enemy into Senya if she's the highest health hero on the enemy team, which means they might be in for a world of hurt. They might do a bunch of counterattacks to him, reflect a bunch of damage. Obviously, Conqueror Lilius also has that redirected provoke, so that is another option for you if Senya is the highest health hero. And then lastly, there are other characters that you can play with her, such as General Purgus or Spectre Tenebria. These are characters that kind of force the opponent to have to go into the Senya in order to potentially take a bunch of reflected damage and obviously some counterattacks, because you can't actually attack Spectre, and people usually don't want to attack General Purgus because they don't want to give you the combat readiness push. Senya doesn't have a ton of good matchups, but the ones that she does have, she wins pretty handily. It's usually why when you look at tier lists from other Epic 7 content creators, they usually have her as niche, but a lot of people recognize her as very good. It's because she is an amazing answer to some of the most problematic or annoying heroes to fight in all of Epic 7. She's great against casino-style characters like Violet, Remnant Violet, and Rem. If you're willing to play the long game, Senya can easily 1v1 most of these characters without breaking a sweat. She's also super good against characters that punish you for landing critical hits on them, such as Spirit Eye Celine and Martial Artist Ken. These two counter whenever you land a critical hit against them, but Senya can't crit, so she can just kind of wail on them all day without really getting punished for it. And then the other major reason you see her picked is against squishy Cleave characters. She's pretty good against Arbiter Vildred because he just is way too squishy and will take way too much damage trying to kill Senya, and obviously counters help that as well. And another really interesting interaction is against Straze. Straze is a character that tries to kill the highest health hero on the enemy team easily as long as he has way more attack. Well, Senya is the highest health hero on your team, and you can trust me, you can beef up the HP really high in exchange for some attack. You don't really have to go with exactly what we talked about in the equipment section here, but if you want to have an anti-Straze tech character, you can build like a 25k HP Senya with some attack in like the 5,000s, and the Straze just has 0 game impact as long as the Senya is not banned. So that is a really cool interaction that I think you should be aware of. Senya being a green character, obviously she's going to have a bad matchup against teams that are primarily red focused. So you don't really want to be picking her into teams where they have things like Charlotte, Milam, or something like Research or Carrot. You're just not going to be able to win those games long term. Speaking of long term, we talked about how Senya is a character that likes to weather the storm and play that long game. Well, she's really good at that, but she's not the best character at playing the long game. So characters that will outscale her in the super late game, such as like Apocalypse Robbie, Ruel of Light, or Maid Chloe, these characters can go way longer than Senya can. And she is not fast enough and she doesn't hit hard enough to actually get these characters off the board. So if you're playing against these characters, it's not Senya's job to deal with them. You need another character. And if you don't, you're just going to basically play a 10-minute game and die a slow, miserable death. So keep that in mind. One of the big things that really annoys me about Senya as a character is how dependent she is on that counter-attacking stance. And you really don't want to be sacrificing stats to get a bunch of ER to protect it. I wish it was more of an undispellable move or an unremovable buff, so to speak, because characters like Bellion and Summertime Assyria can absolutely ruin your day if they can just remove the buff off of you. It feels like Senya has way less impact and she's super easily controlled at that point. So these characters are ones I'd probably avoid bringing her against as well. So yeah, Summertime Assyria Cleave, probably not something you want to play Senya against. And then we talked about it earlier in the video, but just to wrap up and recap, Politis and Celine, while they're not the best against Senya, Senya can absolutely deal with them. The fact that Grace of the Battlefield is a non-attack skill, everyone else around you on your team is in danger because of that, because it is a non-attack skill. It will trigger both the S2 passives of these characters, and that could basically be a game ender for you. And that is going to do it for how to play Senya. Hopefully this video was of some help to you. I apologize for it going a little bit long, but I wanted to cover everything I possibly could on this character because I do like her, and I do feel like she's one of the more underexplored characters in the game. If you want to use a spreadsheet similar to the one that is like mine in this video, I have one that I will link down in this video's description. You can copy the Senya sheet that is on it and it will automatically calculate the S2 passive for you. If you have any other questions, as always, my Discord is going to be linked down in this video's description. And if you want to learn more characters in Epic 7 in this same how to play video style, a playlist should be on your screen now. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your holiday if I do not see you all before then. And please look forward to the next video. Hopefully I can get one more out before Christmas. Until then, later.